Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to GTSRL Season 37. It is EU Division 2 once again, and I'm your host, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. So, last night we saw EU Division 1 conclude with some absolutely fantastic racing up and down the field. It was carnage, it was chaos, you named it, we had it a little bit here, there and everywhere. But we are back tonight with EU Division 2 as they bring their season to a conclusion, and we have got some fantastic racing ahead of us. Now, with this in mind, we need to take a look through our standings, of course, and tell you the story so far after 2 rounds, and the fact that we are looking at a major championship battle in both the Drivers' Championship and also the Constructors' Championship. So as we go through our field then, let's start to introduce our participants one by one as we always do, and we say hello to everybody who's tuning in, whether you're in stream chat at the moment or just watching at a distance. We say hello to Zeronic, Driving Dutchman and Robert Dimikiro. Hope you're all doing well, folks, and to all those of you who I haven't mentioned, I hope you're doing well and you've had a good start to your week. The first 2 days are now complete and we've got 3 more to go as we move into the halfway point tomorrow. So without further ado, we start off with the one MDC 3755. Here in the Ferrari 458 Italia, what have this been? Group 4's mid-engine rear-wheel drive cars only tonight. MDC going for his personal favourite pick rather than perhaps the meta pick of the cars here, and that is the Ferrari. He's currently our Drivers' Championship leader, sitting on 94 points and holding firm and looking to consolidate his overall win in EU Division 2 tonight with another solid set of results. However, along the way, he's got to expect some stiff opposition from the likes of the Dutchman of KLS1. Where the Brits going for the Ferrari, the Dutchman's going for the Citroen, which, as we saw yesterday, quite a strong car. And KLS1 is second in the championship at the moment on 87 points. So only what is 7 down on our leader. But of course, he's got a lot of effort to put in tonight if he wants to overcome that 7-point deficit and walk away with the crown of EU Division 2. It's then a further 10 points down the field to Erlefan. Erlefan, known as Peachy Earl out on circuit, the Finnish driver here, bringing the McLaren 650S, which was perceived to be, as of EU Division 1 last night, the best possible choice for the circuit, because we are here at Monza, where the straights are very vital to your overall lap time, and the 650S is very strong on the straights, what with its very strong 7-speed gearbox. As we get our first early practice start underway, one of our drivers being given multiple practice starts tonight, because turn 1 at Monza is known as one of the 7 nightmare states of the racing world. But Elephant's sitting on those 77 points, and, well, he'll be looking to do his utmost to make sure he cements his place in the top 3 in the Drivers' Championship, if not improve and perhaps pip KLS1 to P2, or if we see some shock results, could he even come away with the championship win? We then haven't got far to go down the order. Pardon me. We can then go further down the order in terms of Josh Bosch. Now, Josh Bosch here, who is the number 2 driver in terms of this practice start. So that's the British driver there in the GT by Citroen. Now, Josh Bosch, of course, running in the same team as MDC, as they all come down towards turn 1 for the first time of this practice start. Everybody getting a little bit of practice in. We should point out firstly that Josh Bosch, sitting 4th in the Drivers' Championship on 74.5 points, is only 2.5 points off of the 3rd placed Peachy Earler at this time, and really has a very good chance of getting himself, as we come out because of the practice start now being complete, he's got a very good chance of potentially picking up the P3 in the championship standings for our drivers, if not P2. But on top of that as well, we've got to remember that Josh Bosch is taking part in support of the Macmillan Cancer Charity Trust alongside his teammate MDC, and we've had it told to us, by the way, that Josh Bosch, if he and MDC, as their team, win the Constructors tonight, they will be Josh Bosch will be donating, and I'm just going to make sure I get this right here. Josh Bosch will be donating a further £30 on top of all the points he earns in this round to the charity. So that's only going to increase his tally even more if him and MDC walk away with the Constructors today, as we appear to have somebody stuck on the grid. I think that's Driving Dutchman there, or something's gone very wrong. And the race has just been cancelled, and we will be getting our cameras back out on circuit very shortly. But just now, I'm going to copy into the stream chat if you just want to check him out. Josh Bosch's just giving page. And remember, if you do want to check it out, feel free to spread the word, spread the love, and if you're feeling a little bit generous as well, why not make a donation in support of a brilliant fund and indeed a brilliant charitable cause in the fight against cancer. Just give us 2 seconds to put this in the chat. As we get a second stock check underway in order to help everybody and make sure to feel very comfortable into running to turn 1. Now, outside of Josh Bosch then, let's take a little look further down the field in terms of our drivers. 5th place at the moment goes to a driving Dutchman, as we're coming down to the grid once again. And, well, this time, driving Dutchman is bringing out, what with the fact that he shares a very similar name to some other drivers as well. So I believe driving Dutchman is our Dutch. I'm just going to make sure of that. I don't want to get things confused here because we do have 3 people with pretty much identical names. But our Dutch today bringing, and driving Dutchman bringing the Ferrari 458 Italia. And a rather interesting pick because it's not seen to be one of the 2 strongest cars here. It's probably the 3rd strongest out of those we've seen run around the circuit, but it can still do quite well, the Ferrari, so long as it's got a bit of slipstream and the driver feels confident up at the 2 Lesmos. And as we look through our notes, we can confirm that driving Dutchman is indeed... Well, no, he's not our Dutch, my apologies. Driving Dutchman is a completely separate driver and he's just left the lobby. That's why I'm getting all confused. My apologies for that, folks. That was very silly of me as we come out. So our Dutch is not driving Dutchman. In fact, driving Dutchman has left the room and will be returning in due course. But he's currently sat on 59.5 points, so quite a way off of the P4, P3, P2 and P1 places in the Drivers' Championship, but looking to perhaps consolidate his P5 in the Drivers' Championship tonight, as he is 9 points ahead of one Roland 92, who we know out on the circuit as we know him will be our Dutch Killer, who is our Dutch. Right, so there's the difference between the 2. Our Dutch is the one we were looking at, who's currently 6th in the championship. And as I say, our Dutch has got a lot of work to do today if he wants to move up the standings and potentially pinch P5 from driving Dutchman. He's got 9 points to gain as a minimum over whatever driving Dutchman earns today. Oh, goodness me, I'm going to be going fully Dutch by the end of tonight. And as we just say hello to some more people in the stream chat, including but not limited to Name of the Moon, D31, and also one Not Kapow, and Remon VM1. Hope you guys are all doing very well and having a good week so far. And say hello to Gomez as well, Gomez 1988, who is in the stream chat. And I'm doing okay, thank you folks. It's been another weird day in the United Kingdom thanks to the weather just being odd, but we move into February and feeling fine and dandy as best as one can be. But as we continue to go down through our order then, we now move on to the German of Robert de Mercure. One of my personal favourites. Of course, I can't play favourites when doing commentary, but I do love seeing Robert perform to his utmost. I'm sure many of you do. The German bringing the 650S today, the McLaren, currently sat P7 in the Drivers' Championship on 50.5 points, alongside, funny enough, our Dutch. So we have got a tie at the moment for P6 in the Championship, but on the countback, I believe it is our Dutch who is ahead. And then we go, so he'll be looking to do his utmost today, much like what our Dutch will be trying to do to get as many points as possible to secure his place and potentially pip driving Dutchman to P5, or at least pip our Dutch to P6 in the driver's standings. We've then got Jerry, our driver, as we jump over to him here, running in the light for light livery alongside his Dutch comrade, our Dutch. So both of them picking the Ferrari 458 Italia and running around on the circuit together. This is some fantastic advertising to see for the Benetton team. Jerry, having had a rather interesting set of results over the last couple of weeks, really finds himself today on 47.5 points and just a little bit out of contention for the top 5 Drivers' Championship positions, but he is only 3 points off of Robert de Mercure in the battle for P6 in the championship standings, what with our Dutch also being on 50.5 points, much like Robert. So Jerry, our driver, looking to do his utmost today to flip the table upside down and try to upset some expectations of the drivers ahead of him, perhaps. We've then got one Mr. Race to Rule, who is P9 in the Drivers' Championship on 44.5 points, so 3 points down, and currently not at the circuit. The Canadian is expected to be joining literally as the start checks conclude, and we're about to get qualifying underway at that point. Unfortunately, he's on a long-haul flight at the moment and will not be joining us until the very last moment based on his current timetabling. And as we take a further look through the standings then, we also need to reintroduce one more time K2XR. Well, unfortunately, we won't be reintroducing K2 tonight because I have been informed that K2 will not be joining us in this race, who's currently sat in P10 in the Drivers' Championship on 36 points, and K2 will not be building on his previous results. So his best result will be, well, he will be losing definitely P10 in the Drivers' Championship to Furky the Viper tonight, because Furky just literally needs to come last in one of the races in order to pick up enough points to jump him. And speaking of Furky, here is the Turkish driver bringing the McLaren 650S tonight, and Furky on 35.5 points will be looking to jump ahead of K2 and seeing how close he can get to that battle for P6 in the Drivers' Championship. Albeit, in terms of the gap between Furky and our Dutch, the gap at the moment is 15 points precisely, so Furky's got a lot of work to put in today in order to leap over those guys. We've then got in P12 in the Drivers' Championship at the moment one set of trousers of doom. The Ferrari driver bringing the 458, of course, the British driver. He's looking at 31.5 points so far, 4 points down on Furky the Viper, but what can Trousers do today, with luck not really being on his side at any point over the course of this season so far, whether it be in round 1 or 2, and he's just signing some autographs to the fans at the fence there. And then he is joined by his teammate a little bit further down in the standings, Valive 19, who sat on 27.5 points, and P13 in the Drivers' Championship. And Valive really having to make up for a lot of lost ground in the fact he did not participate in round number 1. He was unable to due to some issues. So as a result, it was a case that instead, round 2, he had to start his campaign with a solid set of points, and he's looking to do even better tonight. And we know he can be very adventurous with his moves, and he'll need to be adventurous as it is Monza, and Monza rewards those who's brave under braking into the chicanes in particular. And then last but not least of our drivers running in EU Division 2, and we're just looking around for them, is one Simfab, the German driver who is not currently out on circuit or in the paddock. We're still waiting for them to show up. Currently sat on 14.5 points, P14 in the Drivers' Championship, and will need to put in a huge string of results to move their way up the standings today. But that is really the story in terms of who's hot and who's not at the moment. And as we take a look around the field once more, we now come on to the Constructors' Championship, and we need to talk a little bit about this. So, barring any major incidents tonight or any unexpected outcomes, it is very likely, or it is reputed, and I would say so with about 90% confidence, that Team Macmillan, or the Macmillan Machine as I like to call them, of MDC and Josh Bosch, are going to be winning the Constructors tonight. They're currently sat on 168.5 points. They've got a firm grip on the Constructors' Championship, and well, to give you an idea of that gap between them and second place, there's a gap of 53.5 points to the second place team of Arspinus Racing, consisting of Peachy Erler, the Finnish driver, and also K2, and K2's not racing tonight, so that would mean that Peachy cannot make up the deficit. So in fact, what I can say right now is that Arspinus Racing will not be in contention for taking the Constructors' Championship. They have no way to do so unless K2 suddenly turns up, because the maximum points haul a single driver can get is 49 points, and the gap is 53 points, so they are out of contention for winning the Constructors tonight. So Peachy has got it all on his shoulders. It then falls to third place in the Constructors, team number 7, who are at the moment 11.5 points down on Arspinus Racing, and they consist of one KLS1, the Dutchman here in the Citroen, and also the German driver Simfab, who is not currently at the circuit, and we're waiting for them to potentially show. If they both turn up, they have an outside chance, it could be argued, of dethroning the Macmillan Machine from winning the Constructors' Championship, but more so they'll be looking to try and overhaul Arspinus Racing through their combination of points tonight, as will the Benetton Tribute Racing team, who are currently 4th in the Constructors' Championship, only 3.5 points behind team number 7, and the Benetton team consists of our Dutch, as seen here, and running along with him, Jerry, our driver. They're both together once again, and if they can get solid results tonight, they could see themselves wiggling up into P3 in the Constructors, and potentially even P2 if Picciola does not have a good evening at the circuit. But of course, they've got to keep an eye on their mirrors because they are being chased very heavily by our fifth place team in the Constructors' Championship. Well, in fact, we've got two teams vying for fifth place at the moment, both on 95 points. On countback, it is team number 4 at the moment who are fifth on countback, and they consist of Furky the Viper, so our Turkish driver in the McLaren here, of course, and driving a Dutchman, who is driving around. Well, I believe he has returned to the lobby after the stuck check saw him getting stuck, and he is bringing, we should point out, a different car. He is bringing the Honda NSX, and this is great to see, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Honda NSX in due course. But they're on 95 points, and joint with them in 5th in the Constructors at the moment on 95 points as well is team number 1, consisting of Race to Rule, the Canadian who's not yet here, we're waiting for them to turn up, and Robert DiMacchio, who is of course here in the SAS liveried 650S, not running camouflage unlike Pies last night, so this one you can actually make out. But those guys, well, they're in direct contention, and really we do have, in terms of how the dust is going to settle after the 3 races tonight, we have got a grand total of 5 teams all contesting second place in the Constructors' Championship. So almost as much concern as the 6-way battle for the Constructors' Championship in EU Division 1 last night. It's going to be close. And then last but not least in Constructors at the moment, in 7th is Team Chubba Chups, consisting of Valev and also Trouser Doom, both bringing the Ferraris tonight, of course. These guys are currently set on 59 points, and they would need a huge result to see themselves moving up from the bottom step of the Constructors. Not to say it's not possible, mind you, but they're going to need to put in a huge amount of legwork to overcome the gap. But that's how things sit as we're seeing some more drivers turning up. And as we take a look further around the field, let's talk a little bit then about the cars, the form, and what we can expect. So what we saw yesterday, as we look at Robert DiMacchio running around on the circuit right now, we saw that the Honda NSX was the... No, not the Honda NSX, the McLaren 650S. I'm reading the Honda NSX out of the chat, that's why I'm saying that. The McLaren 650S was the strongest car, if you excluded the race start. Now, why am I saying that? Well, you're going to see in this practice start as we get another stock check and also a turn 1 rundown practice underway. The thing you have to keep in mind is that at the start, the Citroens have the best launch off the line by the looks of things. The Ferrari comes close, but the Citroen has the best launch because of the way it is geared. Particularly first, second and third gear are very strong. The McLaren, meanwhile, lacks the acceleration in the first 3 gears, but once it gets into the higher end of its 7-speed gearbox, and we should point out that the Ferrari, the Citroen and the McLaren all have 7-speed gearboxes, it is in gears 4 through to 7, which the McLaren is strong. And you've got the example there where Picciola bogged down, so they were a bit delayed on their launch sequence. You can see that Josh Bosch already has pulled almost 0.4 of a second away from the guys around him, and particularly Picciola. He's got about 0.6 of a second now, but that would be about 0.4 if Pichi had nailed the start there. When you turn it over, however, because Monza has so many long straights, what you can imagine is that as soon as we get onto these long straights, such as going through Curva Grande, which is turn 3, we're coming through it about now, and also you've got the run down to the Ascari chicane and the run down to Parabolica and the start-finish straight, that is where the McLaren starts to shine, because if you upshift it relatively early before you hit the relative limiter, what you find is the gears are arranged in such a way that you get a huge boost of horsepower and a nice amount of torque input from the gears, and that enables the car to go very fast down the straights compared to the cars around it. And that is why the McLaren is seen as the ideal pick. The Citroen, however, the aim of the game in the Citroen is to effectively use the launch at the start to get past the McLarens and then essentially become a rolling roadblock as everybody's leaving the room for some reason. Not sure what's going on here. Okay, we're closing the lobby and restarting. We've got connection issues. Okay, so there's been a lot of connection issues, so we are restarting the lobby. Sorry about that, folks. We're just going to wait and find out when the new lobby's been opened. But the Citroen is all about getting that great launch off the line and then essentially trying to separate some of the McLarens from you. So that way, say if you're starting P3, you want to try and get into P1 by the end of the opening chicane. And then the McLarens that are behind you, you want to let them get back past you and use them to pull you along on the straights and hope that you're able to stay with them for the majority of the race and then towards the end potentially go for a move and then become a rolling roadblock. The Ferrari, meanwhile, is a bit of an odd choice, and I say that simply because of the fact that it doesn't have any qualities which have put it at the top of anything. It's not the fastest down the straight, nor is it the best off the line in terms of acceleration. But the one thing the Ferrari does have is a very loose rear end. And what that means is going through the medium speed apex corners, say third and fourth gear corners, such as the two Lesmos, and going through the Ascari chicane, that is where the Ferrari is going to do very well. And also at Parabolica, it will feel very nice because it's able to maintain a very good apex speed through those corners compared to particularly the McLaren and a little bit more so than the Citroen. So that's why the Ferrari is an alternative pick, but you do have to work it hard to get a strong result, and you do need to rely on the slipstream. As we're waiting for MDC, our lobby host tonight, to restart his PlayStation 4, and then we'll be getting underway once again. Now, why was I quite happy to see a Honda, you're probably wondering? Well, the thing about the Honda NSX is that it's a bit of an oddball car. The Honda NSX doesn't have a particular strength. In fact, you would argue that, that the Honda actually is probably the worst possible pick you can make because it only has a 6-speed gearbox, the NSX here, whereas the street version has a 9-speed gearbox. The one modelled for Group 4 in GT Sport has a 6-speed gearbox. The difference, however, is that the Honda has quite a lot of straight line speed once you get it up to 6th gear and you really get underway. On top of that, another thing to consider about the Honda is that whilst it's not light on its tyres, nor is it heavy on them, so it doesn't experience an overwhelming amount of tyre wear, although I say that it has had 1% weight added to it recently, much like the Citroen. But again, that is to accommodate a balanced performance change, which has seen the reintroduction of the Alfa Romeo 4C and the Megane Trophy into the mix. But the Honda is an all-rounder, and if a driver can master the fact that it's a jack of all trades, master of none, and that it's got quite a bit of straight line speed credentials, then it could prove rather well today. But the deficit that the Honda has is the fact that it's only got that 6-speed gearbox, so its acceleration will be found lacking potentially compared to the cars around it. As we say hello to Vincent Simmer in the chat, and we'll just see if anybody else has popped in here as well. Doesn't look so they have. But we're just going to be waiting now for the lobby to be reopened. It should be reopened within the next couple of minutes. And whilst we are waiting, just so that way you get a feel for what a Honda NSX looks like, i.e. the Group 4, for those who are wondering. As we just yoink one out of our garage. And for reference, I'm running this Honda NSX as part of the Acelift Design Endurance Championship this year. As we just load in. We don't need to keep hearing the engine sound bites, so we can get rid of that. But the Honda NSX with its 3.5 litre V6 engine, of course, for the purposes of Group 4 and indeed for all of the racing groups in GT Sport, its hybrid battery has been removed. And the lobby is already back up. Right, we will make our way back into the lobby. Thank you for that, Jerry, our driver. Alrighty, and we hop back into the lobby then. And I get the feeling that MDC did not make this a private room, because we have got a load of random strangers joining in, so we are going to have to crash this lobby and open another one. But we are having a very interesting evening so far. And we have just received confirmation, ladies and gentlemen, that Race to All has just touched down and will be joining us in 5 minutes' time. So we will have the Canadian join us on circuit for qualifying. And with the delays we've experienced in terms of getting the lobby set up, we may even have him for one start check. We're just waiting patiently. Little mistakes happen, it's no biggie. But whilst we're waiting, in terms of who's hot and who's not driving around at the moment, MDC has been on a flyer, picking up, well, practically all the points over the course of the 2 rounds so far. Had a slightly weaker round in week number 2. So round 2 at Tsukuba with the 4-wheel drives compared to the first round, which was at Interlagos in the front engine rear wheel drive cars. We can see that MDC has a 2-bar. Hop back in then. As everybody piles back into the room then, and really we're counting down. But MDC really is the favourite at this point to pick up the championship. But it should not be counted out the fact that Catalyst 1 has been showing a very consistent form. And indeed, the Dutchman has really come to life in Season 36 with 44 points in round number 1 and 43 points in round number 2. And you do have to wonder whether he's going to be able to bring some surprises here in the GT by Citroën. One of our drivers who also really came to life, it should actually be pointed out, with that brilliant win in race number 3 of round 2 last week, was this man here, the Finnish driver of Peachy Erla, in the fact that whilst in round number 1 he was only able to pick up 31 points, in round number 2 he picked up 46 for what was a win in race number 3 and also a win in race number 2. Let's not forget that. Peachy really putting in a great turn of form, and the fact that he's bringing the McLaren here tonight could see him pick up even more points, especially given that MDC's running that Ferrari. As we get a start check underway to make sure that all of our drivers can run the race. Alrighty then, so we get this start check underway, and it looks as though everybody's piling into the race now. And it could potentially be McDonald's internet, you never know. But just to give you an idea then of what it'll be like to start towards the rear of the field as we sit on board with Dutchman. And in fact, we're inside the Honda right now. And we see one driver who has failed to get off the grid, and that is Valave. So it looks as though Valave has failed the start check there. As we see that lovely looking Honda come charging down towards turn number 1. And all of our drivers really using this one to make sure they can actually pull off rather than worrying about practicing turn 1 at this point because of the connectivity issues that we've had so far. But Valave just stuck there at the start, and that's very unfortunate. So he is going to have to do a quick restart of his router and also his PlayStation to see whether we can get him racing and underway. But really we're just counting down, and I think the big question will be, what can Peachy Erla do tonight in order to upset the balance in the... Yeah, that's the end of the practice race. But I'm wondering what Peachy Erla can do to upset the balance in the Drivers' Championship, and also how will Josh Bosch get into the mix? What will Josh Bosch bring the Citroën with its acceleration? The Macmillan guys here going for the off-meta cars and seeing what they can achieve. But otherwise now we are just still counting down to get underway with the racing. But we are going to be a little bit delayed in terms of getting qualifying under the way, folks. Probably by about 5 minutes at this point in time because of the fact that Valave got stuck on the grid. So we're going to have to wait for his restart and then do a start check. Plus the fact we do also have some additional drivers still coming through. Includes Rays to Rule, the Canadian, who I can happily say now is down in the paddock and is just trying to get the car out on the circuit at the moment. So we should have him here before qualifying, which is fantastic news. So we're going to have at least 12 drivers tonight, albeit I believe with Simfab not being here right now and also K2 not being able to turn up, we will not have 14 drivers for this round, which is unfortunate because we've had great attendance over the course of season 36 across the whole of the EU. But nonetheless, sometimes things come up. As Race to Rule has just emerged into the paddock, and we are going to be definitely seeing him out on circuit. And we've got the return of Valave. Be sure to let me know in the chat who you're rooting for today, in terms of who you're hoping will be able to pick up the wins here, and will make as much ground as possible in the Drivers and the Constructors Championship. I can't say favourites and I can't play favourites because I've got to be impartial. As we see Trousers are doing, we're coming up to the second chicane. That's good to hear, Robert, that you're feeling a bit more confident tonight compared to the previous two tracks we've raced at. And we're getting one more start check on the way, and allow me to introduce one Race to Rule, the Canadian bringing the 650S. Race to Rule, of course, being our driver at the moment, who is sat P9 in the Drivers' Championship on 44.5 points, and in a very close contention for a potential P6 in the Drivers' Championship if he's able to get a major points haul tonight, and he's in the right car for it. And we are just going to take a look at, well, we're going to see what our Dutch is able to do, and this is an idea of the Ferrari's launch at the start. Keep an eye for how much time and ground he will gain over the McLaren on his right hand side as they go for that opening start, and you'll see that he didn't have the best of starts there, and in fact it does look as though Picciola nailed that start perfectly, and the Ferrari drivers are struggling, I should say, to match Picciola as they have the long drag race down in towards turn 1 here, and Pichi is going to have that inside for the purposes of this start check and this practice run into turn 1. But everybody was able to get away apart from, well, it looks as though Valave is still sat on the grid. That is a disaster. It means we may be losing another driver from tonight unless we can somehow get him going very quickly, as all of our drivers now bring this little practice race to its end. I believe we also had another driver get stuck. And we say hello to Johninho, or Johnny Hodgson as I know him, one of my fellow competitors from ADEC. And indeed, for those wondering about KLS1, he is also a participant in the Acerlift Design Endurance Championship Tier 3 for this year in Season 1. And doing a very good run so far, good run of form, as he's making his way up the standings in his inaugural season. But really, we are waiting now for any of our drivers who did get stuck to do one more quick restart. I'm presuming so. I'm just waiting for confirmation from our lead host at this point. So a question that some of you may be wondering right now, Group 4, what is a Group 4 car in the eyes of GT Sport? Well, Group 4, I like to refer it as the touring car class. These are cars that you could see on a road, well, minus the GT by Citroën, because it's a prototype car or a concept car made for a collaboration between Citroën and GT Sport. But the thing with the Group 4s, as we receive confirmation that we're expecting the live to one more restart, and after that we're going to do 2 start checks and get underway with qualifying. So qualifying is going to be delayed by a further 5 minutes, so it'll be 10 past the hour that you'll see qualifying get underway, as all 3 of our drivers here are running around. The thing with the Group 4s, effectively, is that... Pardon me. The thing with the Group 4s is that they are road cars. So these are cars which you would see on the street, albeit they have been slightly modified so they run about on circuit. The modifications include the addition of a massive rear spoiler, typically, to apply some additional downforce for cornering. And on top of that, just some slight tweaks to the engine and also some tweaks to the aero, albeit those tweaks to the aerodynamics are very limited, if that. They're typically more towards the engine. Now what this means is, because it's a sort of touring car cast with road cars, these cars, you have to rely on their natural performance. You can't expect them to go around corners at absolutely monstrous apex speeds compared to a dedicated GT3 or GT2 car, or Super GT car, which is also known as GT2. As a result of that, our drivers will have to rely on the car's natural mechanical grip. As we can see, there's been a bit of an incident and everybody's going piling forward into turn 1. But on top of that, whilst the spoiler will add a little bit of downforce, it's not downforce that can just be relied upon. But what it also means is that the natural characteristics of each car will really come through. So if a car's got very strong top end speed, that is its strength that has to be relied upon. If a car's got very strong cornering, you have to utilise that as much as possible. And it leaves no space for error in terms of the fact a driver has to know their car inside and out, and then they really have to apply it as much as possible. As we say hello to a Vitor Knight in the chat, and we also say hello to Sweet Love. Hope you guys are doing well and you're having a good first half to your week. We're just waiting to get qualifying underway. Now personally for me, I love Group 4, it's my favourite class in GT Sport for the simple reason that because these cars have so little aero on them compared to the other racing categories, it means I have to really know my machine inside and out, and I really have to try and min-max everything in terms of every corner, every apex, every straight, knowing exactly when to upshift on the RPM. I can't afford to make a mistake or lean too much outside of what the car is capable of. So I need to know my apex speeds, I need to know how strong the brakes are going to work. I need to know all this information in other groups, of course, but in these cars I feel it's just so critical to have that extra little bit of knowledge, knowing that actually if I upshift, for example, with the Jaguar F-Type in Group 4, if I upshift at 6,500 RPM, that's the optimum upshift point for the car in all 7 of its gears, not 7,000 RPM at the end of the limiter. But really, we're waiting for Belave to rejoin at the moment, and then we're going to try and get underway at one last time. But whilst we're waiting then, we're just going to pan the camera over to Race Turrell, who is our Canadian driver who's participating tonight. And, well, we'll be hoping to do his utmost to get into P6 in the Drivers' Championship standings, currently sat down in P9, as we get another start check underway, and this is a final set of attempts, if you will, to get everyone moving, including Belave. And here we go then. Will it prove successful on the 9th time of asking? As we pan down to the grid once again. We can see a number of people in the chat rooting for the NSX drivers tonight, including Dutchman. And it looks as though this time everybody's been able to get away successfully, so that is great news, and it means we are going to have a field of 12 drivers racing tonight. That is fantastic, and just hopefully the lobby holds together and doesn't have a pies moment like last night. As they all go through turn 1, you can see they're all taking it a lot more seriously now in terms of doing turn 1, making sure to give one another space, not knock one off of the circuit, as everybody now leaves this practice race. So we're just going to wait now for all of our drivers to retire out of that race. And I think we are due another start check just to make sure everything's stable, and then we are go, go, go. Or at least I'd hope so, because for some reason everybody's still racing around on the circuit, even though this definitely isn't a race right now. Alrighty, so that is complete. And now we're just waiting to see, will we get the one more start check underway, and then it'll be qualifying. And it's at this point that I should emphasise and remind you that given we still have a little bit of time to go, it would be a good idea, if you hadn't already, to go get yourself a liquid refreshment or a beverage of some sort to accompany you during tonight's racing, and also feel free to go grab some popcorn just in case you need a little snack as you go, because it is going to get quite thrilling as we go into the races. Of course, right now with everybody trying to get things sorted, just taking a bit longer than usual, but that's why we have the time that we have available to us, and we're just waiting to see what's going to happen. Yeah, I need to drink and commentate. Thank you, Stan. So we are expecting one more start check in the very near future. Yep, this will be our final start check, and then we get underway with qualifying, because we haven't been advised otherwise, as we're just following Ferky the Viper in the run down towards Parabolica. Indeed, Vitor, that's the trick. Drink and watch. And just a reminder for everyone, if you are interested, keep in mind that Josh Bosch in particular, so our British driver here who's driving the GT by Citroën as we ride on board with him as he does this final practice start, Josh Bosch is racing for charity tonight and has been racing for charity over the course of the whole of this season, with every single point he earns conferring to a British pound donation to the Macmillan Cancer Trust charity. So if he was to get 100 points over the course of the season, he would be donating £100. On top of that, if him and MDC pick up the Constructors' Championship today, which they are on course to do so, Team Macmillan, they're going to be donating an extra £30 to the charity. And I'm just going to put that back in the chat in case you needed a reminder. And so that way, if you do want to check out the calls, well, Zoronic has already beaten me to it. Gosh darn it, Z. But the link is in the chat as just posted by Zoronic, should you be interested in taking a look and even making a little donation of your own, and be sure to spread the word. And I believe that is our final start check completed, so we are going to back out now, and we are expecting qualifying to get underway at any moment. And I should emphasise to you all, ladies and gentlemen, that Zoronic is an actual human being. He is not a chatbot, although he may be replaced with a chatbot in the very near future. Because otherwise he might start asking for liberties from myself. Not liberties, royalties, that's the word. But we are getting underway with qualifying then, folks. So 12 minutes of qualifying is a go, go, go. And let's see what happens by the end of it, as we get our full set of information up on screen for you to see how everybody's doing. And we are going to start off with the current Drivers' Championship leader, MDC, as he makes his way around on his warm-up lap. You can see just getting himself all in the tune. Well, the fact that these racing medium tyres with our tyre wear multiplier of what I believe is times 5, meaning that they will take a bit of wear over the course of a single lap. So you won't want to push these tyres too hard over the course of this warm-up lap, albeit it's probably after the first 3 laps on the tyres, so 1 out lap plus 2 hot laps. That's when the tyre wear really starts to come into effect. And of course, the question will be on some of our drivers, will they burn fuel? Much like what we saw from Olaf last night when he decided to burn fuel. But of course, Ben MK was the one who pipped Olaf to pole in brilliant fashion with that 156. I believe in the end it was a very, very close call between the two drivers. I think they were separated practically by a couple hundredths. But they're all coming around then to get themselves ready to go for their opening lap. We can see there are some drivers towards the rear. For example, Jerry, our driver here, doing quite a bit of fuel burning. And that's a bit of an awkward car to burn fuel in, is the Ferrari, because it's actually very efficient on its fuel. So you literally have to rev the guts out the car. Whereas, funnily enough, the McLaren, the 650S, is actually one of the most difficult cars on fuel within Group 4 because it has a very particular RPM at which you want to upshift to be fuel efficient. If you overclock it on the revs, then you'll be very inefficient on your fuel. But away from that then, we now jump on board to MDC, the British driver, as he goes on to his first flying lap in the Ferrari 458 Italia. So you can see standard affair, charging down the start-finish straight towards turn number 1. Ferrari building up a very gradual amount of speed, and it doesn't quite have that top-end acceleration. Going to be braking at about 154 miles an hour. Coming down then to the opening chicane, bringing it all the way down to first gear to stop the car, and cutting quite a chunk of the second turn, but not the first turn in the sequence. Now swinging it over to the left initially for the start of Curva Grande, and he's going to just gradually eke the steering over to the right hand side here. He wants to be as gentle as possible so as not to put any strain on the tyres and lose any potential apex speed as he goes through Curva Grande. Really nice line through here, and he'll gradually eke all the way over to the right for the second chicane, braking at the Marshall's exit road on the right hand side there, coming down from 5th gear to 2nd gear, cutting as much as turn 4 as he humanly can, but not cutting as much of turn 5 because you can pick up a 1 second penalty for cutting too much of it. Now the two Lesmos braking at about 50 metres, in fact going very deep into the first Lesmo, but catching it nicely with that downshift to 3rd gear there. Just a little bit wide of apex, probably cost himself 2 tenths by missing it overall, and he'll look to improve that on the next warm-up lap. And then will of course practice it in the warm-up lap and go into his flying lap with an improvement. The second Lesmo there, he caught it in 3rd gear very nicely and used the Ferrari's loose rear end essentially to chuck the car through the corner. Now you've got the run down towards Ascari. Turns 8 through to 10. Going to be braking at the 100 metre board there or just before it. 3rd gear to cut over the top of turn 8. He's thrown the car a little bit too heavily though over onto the curb for turn 9 there. And that's cost him about another tenth because he had to get the car resettled on the curb for turn 9. You could see he was hesitant to turn the front of the car in because of the way the car was angled off of 8. And that means that he has cost himself some time in the run down towards Parabolica. And now he's probably lost about 2 tenths in the run down to Parabolica because of the fact that he lost that momentum out of 9 and 10. But Parabolica was not too bad, thrown out to 4th gear, and this has been a reasonable lap from MDC as he pulls over to the right to shorten the distance to the finish line. Of course, I think there's going to be a lot more lap time out there, and he comes across line well, 158.1, well off what we saw yesterday, and I think we could be looking at 157s in qualifying as his rival Cal S1 comes across with a 158.5, Dutchman with a 159.2, and then Pete Giurla, another championship contender, for the 158.2 so far. So the Finnish driver not able to closely contest MDC, down by a tenth right now. Furky the Vipers cross the line with 158.6, and as we look further afield, Trouser Doom also in the Ferrari with that 159.9. I think there's plenty more laps out there and plenty more time to be gained by our drivers. As you can see, his teammate Valet from Team Chubba Chops has set a 158.7, and Valet actually putting in a very strong lap there for his opening lap and only 6 tenths down on our provisional pole sitter. Now, speaking of our pole sitter, his teammate Josh Bosch on his opening lap only set a 2-minute, pretty much an exactly 2-minute lap. I think there's a lot left in the tank for Josh Bosch in terms of lap time there, and he's had a bit of an error-strewn first flying lap because that is quite far off of where he'll want to be. He's almost 2 seconds down on our provisional pole lap at the moment, and our Dutch very similarly. I think that was a burner lap there, as we can see that MDC has hopped the car back to the pits, and I think that might have actually been a little bit of a bad call by MDC because now he'll be going out again, and he'll be going out on a full tank of fuel, which means he's going to have to burn the fuel off again, and he's going to be costing himself a bit of time. But outside of that, the one thing you've got to keep in mind around here is when I talk about the fuel usage on the straights, and you can see that Robert is actually burning a huge amount of fuel out of the car here. The fact that his opening flying lap was a 3.5 minute lap, that shows he's doing a lot of fuel burning. You really need to get rid of the fuel in these cars because you've got so many straights, and the lighter the car, the more speed you can gain on the straights, and a difference of 1 to 2 miles an hour at the end of each straight could be the difference between you being on pole and you being in 5th. it's multiple tenths that you can gain just by having a fuel-derived car. As we can see, the MDC at the moment, the fact that he's gone back out, he will have to burn off that fuel, but perhaps he feels confident he's got a much better lap in store. He just simply needs to hook it up. As Picciola comes around to complete another flying lap then, and this is not an improvement, I should point out, and Dutchman coming across the line already in the Honda NSX and has actually set a 158.3 on his second flying lap, so that NSX only 2.5 tenths down on that provisional pole time. Remember, I did say do not count the NSX out. It is a car with its unique quirks, and the Dutchman is definitely showing those off. As KLS1 has re-entered the circuit, so he did a flying lap and then he pitted after that flying lap. So some of our drivers going for the reset back to the pits, and Jerry, our driver at the moment, sat in provisional P5 with that 158.5, and he's got to be careful here because he's got KLS1 coming through. But KLS, what of him being on a warm-up lap here, or an out lap as we should say, I don't think he'll be too annoyed if he does get obstructed by Jerry, our driver, to a small extent. But as we can see, Furky the Viper then coming around on his third flying lap as he's improved to a 158.6 and provisional P7 on his second flying lap. I think he's going a bit long here, and now he's going to start to feel that graining on that front left in particular, and you can see that he's running a front loaded car is Furky. The engine and the majority of the weight is towards the rear, but the brake balance is towards the front on this car because of the fact he's got more wear on that front left than he has on that rear left. And what with Monza being a clockwise circuit, you would expect the left hand tyres will have to do more work than the right hand tyres because there's more right hand corners which use the left hand tyres more than there are left hand corners which use the right hand tyres, because the centrifugal force or centripetal force, however you want to describe it, whether it's the fictional or the realistic force. But that's physics, we're not going to go too much into that right now. But you can see in terms of improving lap times, as we gobbledygook there, that our Dutch has improved to 158.0, so a tenth up and having quite a bit less fuel in the car. That seems to have helped the Ferrari driver just pip MDC so far, but will MDC respond? That is the big question. We will keep an eyebrow up in keen interest as Picciola is coming to the end of another flying lap, but this looks as though he's returning to the pits for a fresh set of boots, so we're not going to worry too much about that, as KLS1 is on a best. He's on a purple sector 1 here, is KLS, so he is absolutely going for it, and we're just going to ride on board with the Citroen driver here as he takes the first of the two Lesmos, and we also say hello to Benji in the chat. And as he comes through the second of two Lesmos, going a bit deep initially on entry there, and I think that caught KLS1 a bit by surprise, but he brought it back nicely by simply running over the apex curve there, and by hanging it on that apex curve, kept a really nice line through there, and now charging that down towards the Ascari chicane then. And the question will be, can he absolutely nail it? He won't want to go up to 7th there. That's going to cost him a tiny bit of time, that little upshift to 7th, but it's literally going to be splitting hairs, perhaps a 100th or two, as our Dutch comes into the pit. And now it's only one more straight to go before Parabolica, and KLS1 is going to have to do his utmost to get the most out of it. And you can see he's going all the way up to the end of the revs, going up to 9,000 RPM in the Citroen, because he knows that he's simply just got to try and maximise each gear to get rid of some fuel for future laps with 3 minutes to go as he goes deep at Parabolica. So he has lost a bit of time there, and I think he got caught out by the fact he had to come down from 7th. And 7th gear did have a bit of acceleration, but I don't think it's going to be enough. Although I say that's looking pretty good, and it is a 158.5, so he's up to P4 at the moment provisionally, and he's only 6 thousandths off of Peachy, who's third right now. Now, will MDC respond as he's on his new flying lap at the moment? He's improved to 158.0. He's only 7 thousandths off of our Dutch, I should point out, folks. So MDC and our Dutch right now in a head-to-head battle for who's going to be the pole sitter. And keep in mind right now as well the fact that MDC is on a flying lap, and he will have one more after this, but he will not have time to change tyres once again. So he's going to have to do these 2 flying laps on worn tyres, and he's already 200ths up in sector 1, but that time can be lost or gained even more in the following sectors, particularly sector 2 here, because he's got to nail the 2 Lesmos. As you see, he does get a good run into Lesmo 1 there, but what about Lesmo 2? That'll be the big question as we stay to the exterior cameras this time. Breaking down, and he chucks the car onto the apex curve and actually gets it very well planted in 3rd gear. They're using the lower gear to get more acceleration compared to what 4th gear would offer, and that's what the Ferrari really needs here. You need to use the gears as much as possible to get it up to those high speeds, because it just seems to lose that acceleration once you get into those high gears. And he's 1/10 up on our best lap so far that we've seen. He did cut a lot of the Ascari entry point there, but I don't think that's going to be a penalty. You can cut a huge chunk of turn 8 if you want to, but it will throw you across turn 9, but MDC controlled that perfectly. And now as he's coming with one more corner to go, he's coming up to Parabolica. And coming, charging down towards Parabolica then, what could he do? He's got to nail this completely because Parabolica has caught out so many of our drivers today. There is quite a bit of rubber out on the circuit of Parabolica that maybe throws off. And I say that, and we've just had a huge improvement from Robert Di Michiero, who's set a 157.8 for provisional pole. But will MDC respond as he comes up to a line? And it is a 157.7. So pole is changing constantly, and MDC's got one more lap available to him, as has Robert here, as we've got less than a minute to go. But where did that come from? Robert in the McLaren, well, you can see he's definitely burnt some fuel out of that car, in the fact he's down to about 70% fuel already. And I think Robert's decided to save it all just for 2 flying laps, and he's done it's done the trick for Robert, putting himself up on that front row provisionally as we're coming to the end of our qualifying session. And you can see that Valive is still holding on to provisional P4 with that 158.1. A nice lap from the Ferrari driver there, and Team Chupa Chup seeming to find a resurgence of form in the final round tonight, particularly in qualifying, with Valive seeing himself up in the top half of the grid, although his teammate is all the way down in P12 right now, as we see Race Tyrrell has improved to 158.7, putting in provisional P10. But as our drivers are coming across the line, Trousers of Doom has binned it out of the second Lesmo and will not be putting in any more laps. So Trousers there will be starting last for that 159.0. But we're just going to be looking around then as all of our drivers are coming up to the line. And we're just going to hop through some cameras. So Peachy comes across and does not improve. So Peachy qualifies P5 so far. And then we look further around the field, and we see our next driver to come across the line will be the Brit of Valave 19 in the Ferrari. Is he able to improve just that little bit more? I think he's got too much wear on the tyres to improve, but I may be wrong as he comes across the line here, and it is not an improvement. Now behind him, we do have some more drivers coming through, and that is the driver of, well, Driving Dutchman has pulled off the circuit. Ferky the Viper is P9 and does not improve. Josh Bosch improves to a 158.0, which puts him provisional P3 at the moment, and that enables him to act as a rear gunner, as Robert is improving on another flying lap, and he just misses out on pole. Just misses out by the tiniest of margins there. That is so unfortunate for the German. It was looking so strong. And our Dutch has come across the line and improved to 157.8, preventing him provisional P3 and pipping Josh Bosch into P3. So our Dutch finds himself in a very nice spot. And I think, well, we've got more drivers still coming around. Careless One is on a flying lap, but this is very far down on what he's normally done. So I don't think this is going to be an improvement from the Dutchman. And we've also got Race Tyrrell coming out and Trousers of Doom. But Trousers of Doom did have that major incident. So MDC is our fastest lap, and I think is going to be our pole sitter for the purposes of race number 1, as we just followed our final drivers across the line, and our final driver to come across will be Race Tyrrell. And this is looking to be a good lap from Race Tyrrell. Is it an improvement from that 158.7? And it is a 158.5, putting him P9. So with that, that is qualifying complete. So your pole sitter, ladies and gentlemen, is MDC 3755, well 157.7. Of course, he's withdrawn from the track to do the grid for race 1. Robert Di Michiero will line up alongside him in P2. Then it'll be our Dutch who starts off our second row in P3, the Ferrari driver from the Netherlands, of course, and he'll be joined alongside by Josh Bosch, the United Kingdom driver in the Citroen. Very close between these guys throughout in qualifying. The third row of the grid will be started by Valave in the Ferrari, and alongside him will be the Finnish driver of Peachy not having the best of qualifying sessions today, but he'll have to make up for it in the race. The fourth row will be started by the Dutchman of Careless One, and alongside him will be Jerry, our driver. Both Dutchmen having a good qualifying session, albeit I think Careless will have wanted to be a bit further up the grid in the end. Then the fifth, behind them it will be the Driving Dutchman and in the Honda NSX, who just missed out on a very strong top 5 qualifying point there, but the Honda's shown its legs already, and Race Tyrrell will be alongside him. It's then going to be Ferky the Viper, the Turkish driver, and Trouser Doom rounding off our final row, which will be the 6th row of the grid. Trouser Doom, of course, qualifying in the Ferrari, but not too far off of everyone, but finding himself 1.1 seconds down of our pole lap. 1.1 seconds. 1.3 seconds off our pole lap. But remember, this race is just as much about slipstream as it is about having a 1 lap pace advantage in your own capable hands, so it could all happen at any point. And we are hearing that off camera, Robert did lose about approximately 3 tenths out of Ascari. So if he'd nailed Ascari, he would have been on pole. So Robert right now shaking his head in frustration, or at least his car is shaking its head in frustration for him. Robert will be mad at the fact that he's not quite hooked it up in qualifying, but will take the confidence of knowing he's got a lot of pace into the race. And I'd just like to say a very quick thank you to Vitor Knight's wife, who in the chat has said that I'm being confused with Crofty from Formula One on Sky Sports. Well, I'll take that compliment any time of the week. Much appreciated. But really now, we're just waiting to get race number 1 underway. As everybody is told that they can leave the circuit, that the qualifying order is in place for race number 1. And expectations then going into this one. Well, I think if I was in MDC shoes, I know that I'm the championship leader, and I know that my main rivals, i.e. Picciola and Careless One, have qualified much further back than me. So going into turn 1, given that I'm going to be in an acceleration race with a fellow McLaren driver, but also I know I've got some rather dangerous Citroens behind me, I'd look to get through turn 1 and not worry too much about dropping 1 or 2 positions. If I find myself in P3 coming out of the first chicane, but I'm right up the trumpet of the guys in P2 and P1, I'll stay with them and just try to work with them to pull away. Because in MDC's case, he doesn't need to win every race tonight in order to guarantee his Drivers' Championship or to guarantee the Constructors. He just needs to get a solid string of results. That's all he needs to do. And, of course, to beat Picciola and Careless One. The guys behind him, of course, particularly Picciola, will need to do their utmost to get into that lead pack as soon as possible. But to do that, they've got to have good starts and find their way up there after the first couple of chicanes, because lap 1 is so critical in these races at Monza. And meanwhile, as we look further back through, some of our other drivers, well, of course, the driving Dutchman in the Honda here, he's going to have the weakest start of them all. The Honda has the slowest starting procedure of all of the cars available. And pardon me. And we say hello to K2, who is unable to race tonight, but is watching on. And race 1's about to get underway, and we wish K2 all the best. Dutchman has got to think about effective right. Well, I know that I'm going to lose places at the start, but how do I work my way back into the race? So that's what will be on his mind, and it'll be our Citroen drivers, such as Josh Bosch in particular, who I believe is our highest qualified Citroen driver, who's going to have to really maximise that launch sequence at the start, because the Citroen can gain 1 or 2 places just by simply having a good reaction time and then going up through the gears. K2, unfortunately, when they brought the car down to the pack, well, in fact, the car, I should say, was back in the garage at Silverstone where they were doing their practice trials. Not sure why they're doing practice for Monza at Silverstone, but the engine just blew up when they tried turning it over. But without further ado, then, race number 1 coming right at you, folks. And after 5 laps, let's see how the dust settles and who is going to be our race winner. Alrighty, so as we pan down towards our grid, you can see MDC on the right, Robert De Michele on the left. Behind them are Dutch and Josh Bosch. But just keep an eye out for Careless One and Picciola in P7 and P6 respectively. What can they do in trying to make their way up the field? And it's lights out and away they go. And the Ferrari driver of MDC has had a very strong start by comparison with Robert. And in fact, Robert has bogged down quite a bit. And you can see that Josh Bosch already going for a very strong launch up the inside into turn 1. And he's got himself on that inside line, which means I think Josh Bosch has played it very well in the run into turn 1. As so long as nobody makes any major errors, as Ardutch hangs it around the outside of turn 1 and Josh Bosch respectfully gives him the space. There was a little bit of contact from Picciola, who has already made his way up into P5. But everybody has got through turn 1 safe and sound. That is great to see at Monza, of course. But now charging up around the Curva Grande up towards the second chicane, then you can see already how the McLaren drivers are trying to play catch up. And Josh Bosch in P2, he's got past Ardutch, but the thing is Ardutch is now coming back at him and going for the inside line into the second chicane. And Josh Bosch again just showing the respect to the space and realising that it's not going to be won over the course of a single lap, as Ardutch picks up a half-second penalty for cutting track limits at turn 5 there. And we've got some dust being kicked out, and MDC has gone flying off and he's going straight out onto the ground and into the wall, and he has, well, I say that and the lobby's crashed, so MDC's internet has completely gone past. Well, that's well, you know, Pies is definitely in this lobby tonight. Well, the Pies effect has occurred. And to quote Lando Norris in Formula One, it's broken, it's off. Oh, goodness me. And it was already getting underway, and that was pretty much the perfect start for the... That was a perfect start for Team Macmillan, and now they've got to do it all again. So we're just going to have to wait until these technical difficulties are resolved, folks. And we say hello to Having a Crackin' Time in the chat as well. And I believe Having a Crackin' Time is likely to be seen in season 37. I believe he's quite eager to take part. So be sure to say hello to him if you are in the chat with him. He sounds like an awesome dude from what I'm hearing. I hope he's doing well. So yes, we're just going to have to wait and find out what's been done with regards to reorganising things at the moment. Yeah, MDC showing off his very rare line through the Lesbos, i.e. the rally cross line of just simply send it out wide and then come back onto the circuit. Oh, dearie me. Okay, so we've got another lobby that's been formed. Yep, so we are back in the lobby and we're hopefully going to be getting underway with some more racing very shortly. But fortunately, this time we had the connection error right at the start of race one, not right at the end of it. But to quote Lando Norris, it's broken, it's off. And then a word we can't repeat on here. It was lag, K2. It was definitely lag because MDC literally went off at the first Lesbo, disappeared at the second Lesbo, then returned at the entry point to the second Lesbo. I mean, to be fair, I know MDC is a very skilled driver, but I don't think he has the teleportation technique now down that much. And we're getting underway with race number one once again, pretty much immediately once everybody's readied up here. So we're coming straight back at race number one. No stock checks this time. That's a good theory there, Gomez. It'll always be known as a Pies moment now. But here we go then. Race number one, coming at you for the second time of asking. On the right, it's MDC once again. On the left-hand side, it's the McLaren 650S of Robert Di Macchiro. Our Dutch and Furky, the Viper. No, that's not the correct grid. That is definitely not the correct grid, so I think we are going to be cancelling this race. But it'll act as a stock check, so we sort of get that out of the way. And everybody was able to pull off the line, so that's good news. So everybody's able to race. Oh, dearie me. So we are going to be Waiting for everybody to quit out. So now we're waiting for MDC to set the grid. And we'll get underway once again. So we're just waiting now, folks. And in the meantime, I mean, what we saw in the first attempt at race number 1 was pretty much what we predicted in terms of the Citroen drivers needing to make as much ground as possible. And really, our McLaren drivers need to nail their starts in order to have a good run into turn 1. And Robert being caught out to a degree by a poor start there in the first attempt, but he will use that information. So Vincent Simmer asks, how's your Dutch today, TX? Just say Gekkenhuis from time to time. I mean, I've got no idea what I'm saying right now, so if I'm swearing in Dutch and I've offended anyone or I suddenly get blocked off the internet, my apologies. So it's Gekkenhuis. Got it. So that's Madhouse. As we're getting underway once again. Right, this is going to be another attempt at race number 1. This time, hopefully, with the correct grid. Well, this Gekkenhuis is on the loose. As we get underway then. And we're all going to clomp on our way down towards the start-finish line. MDC on the right, Robert on the left. Behind them are Dutch and Josh Bosch. And then, well, keep an eye on Picciola and Callis 1, P6 and P7 respectively. They'll be looking to make their way up the field like a frantic bee. Well, I can't think of a simile at the moment, but we're counting down towards go. Lights out and away they go, and MDC having an absolutely monstrous start this time, and Robert again being caught out by the start lights to an extent, albeit it's been a slightly better start from Robert this time as they run down towards turn 1, and Josh Bosch finds himself squeezed a little bit out towards the grass and not finding a way past, and Robert mindful of the need to go defensive against Josh Bosch. Josh Bosch revealed his hand, of course, with that opening race start, and all of our drivers making it through safely as there's been huge contact, and Picciola has been spun out completely at the end of turn 2. And that means Peachy has dropped all the way to the bottom of the field, and he will not be happy of that as all of our drivers now come through turn 3 and charge up towards the second chicane. And as you can see here, we've got Robert already trying to go back on the reoffensive against our Dutch here. And will he go for a double move here? I don't think he's going to get the double, but he's definitely going to go for the move on our Dutch, and he's not quite able to get it done. Our Dutch holding the defensive posture there, and as they carpet to the first Lesmo, you can see that Josh Bosch, having fallen back a little bit, is gradually creeping back into this fight, and our Dutch is doing enough to hold on right now. But behind him, meanwhile, Josh Bosch, it would seem, is just simply spectating this battle and using these guys to pull him away from Callis 1, who at the moment is falling back in his outer slipstream range of Josh Bosch, as we can see that Race to Rule burning his half-second penalty for track limits at turn number 5, and Valave is right at the back of Callis 1, the Ferrari driver here, having had a good start, now trying to make his way up into the top 5 and further up the field. As we can see, Josh Bosch constantly putting some pressure on Robert here, as our Dutch goes very deep at the first Ascari, and that means he's going to have to rejoin, and he's going to rejoin behind Josh Bosch and Robert. So Robert not able to make the move there. The pressure got to our Dutch, and he simply found his way off into the sandpit, built a sandcastle, and now he's got to contend with Callis 1 and Valave, who are charging after him. And as they cart towards Parabolica for the first time, asking Callis 1 on the inside, I think he's going to have this nailed, and he's just simply going to hook it on the inside. And as they come around to complete the first lap, as Valave goes for the double move, well, to make it into a double then, it is MDC ahead of Robert Dimikiro. Then it'll be Josh Bosch, followed by Callis 1, then Valave, then R Dutch, who's still battling with Valave, then Jerry R Driver, then Furky the Viper, Trouser Doom P9, Driving Dutchman P10, and Race to Rule in P11, and all the way down in P12, and still trying to find his way out is Picciola. As we can see, as they come down towards turn 1, we've got Callis 1 going on the outside and not going fully defensive there, but he's being squeezed on both sides, but he just about holds the defensive line, and there's a little bit of a knock to R Dutch there, and we will take a look back at that later on. But Callis 1 holding on to P4 for now, but he's cleared what was the battle there, and now you've got Valev, who's had to settle down behind him, and Furky the Viper finds himself in P6 as they all come out towards turn 4 for the second time of asking. And Furky the Viper here got a lot of momentum on the back of Careless One and also Valev. Will he go for a sneak move? I don't think so. I don't think he's got enough for an overlap here, and that means they're just going to settle down. And Race to Rule right now is trying to get in there, as we can see that Robert has picked up a 1 second penalty for track limits at the second chicane, and he is going to have to burn that as he comes out the second Lesbos, and that is going to pull Josh Bosch right up into the mix there for second place right now, as MDC has continued to run away. And in fact, Josh Bosch will move up into P2, and I think Robert is going to have to go partially defensive in order to hold off Careless One, or will he simply let the pack behind him pass, because he's going to lose so many places. What the momentum, he's lost 2 already because of that penalty, and Furky the Viper has tucked him behind. So that just goes to show you a 1 second penalty coming out of that chicane is so detrimental to your chances of winning, and Robert now has got it all to do to get back onto the podium. But speaking of people who've got everything to do, as Driving Dutchman has got it very wrong at the Ascari chicane. He's gone into the wall there off of the curb. We're going to take a look back at what happened to Peachiola at the start. So Peachy, as he was coming down in towards turn 1, then stayed on the inside initially and just simply broke as he naturally would into the corner. And then as he came through here, he was found on the outside of turn 2, and I think he's just been knocked wide and he's gone backwards because of Jerry R. Driver hooking in on his inside panel. I don't think there was any malice meant by that, but that's what triggered Peachy to go fully out onto the gravel and spin out as a result. But as they come on to lap number 3, it's now Valev in P3, having got past Careless One initially. It's now going to be 3 wide as they come down towards turn 1. Careless One deciding just to back out of it there and decide to spectate, but Robert getting a double move done and moving up into P3, and that was brave stuff from the German driver there as he now makes his way up into P3. But of course there's still plenty more time in this race. There's still 2.5 laps to go at least. As you can see, they're all coming around Curva Grande here, and now Robert has got to try and break away from the chasing pack, because Robert has got a huge amount of time on his hands here if he can pull away to chase after Josh Bosch. But the problem, of course, for Robert is the fact that if he gets caught fighting particularly Valev, who is going to, of course, try and find an advantage on the McLaren, because in the Ferrari he needs to try and seek an advantage, that you could see that Robert gets pushed back into that battle for P4, and it essentially turns into a 4-way scrap for P3. Behind this lot, of course, Trouser Doom, the Chupa Chups guys, finding themselves further up the field today where they have been previously. Trouser Doom doing his best to hold on to P7 right now and keeping Jerry R. Driver and Race to Rule behind. But do keep in mind one driver who is behind this lot, and that is Peachiola. He's only 2 seconds down from them, and he is gradually catching. As you can see, all 3 drivers here in the battle for P7 sizing one another up. And Jerry R. Driver here, I think, looking for the move into turn 8, but he's cut a huge chunk of the entry corner there for Ascari, and I think that may potentially be a half-second penalty. In fact, it's a second penalty, and Jerry R. Driver will not be pleased with that because he'll have to burn that after he comes out of Parabolica. But up front, it's MDC, 3.5 seconds ahead of Josh Bosch, who in turn is 1.5 seconds ahead of Robert, who is just getting a little bit away from Valev right now, and he's going to continue pulling away as they come around to complete lap 3 and start lap number 4 with the McLaren straight line speed. But it is spreading out a little bit here, as you can see that Race to Rule has already got past Jerry R. Driver, who is needing to burn that penalty now as he starts to burn it on the start-finish straight. And as they come around for the 4th lap, then it will be Peachiola, who has made his way up to P9 and is continuing on this recovery drive. And Race to Rule, will he go for a move into turn 1 as we ride on board with the McLaren driver? No, he thinks better of it and just simply breaks the car down into the chicane. And you note there that he shifted down very late on there, and I think he's doing a bit of tyre management, just doing all the braking in 7th gear before finally shifting down towards 2nd gear. And that means there is going to be no change, as everybody seems to be keeping it rather cool at the moment. I think studying one another, as Valev is getting ever closer to the back of Robert here. The German not being able to pull away from the Brit, who's just tagged the back of Robert's car there, but I don't think there was anything major out of that. Hold on a second, and Furky the Viper, has just gone charging off into the wall. What on earth is happening? He's rejoined into the side of Peachiola, but thankfully Peachy has not had another major incident. That would have absolutely destroyed the Finns race. And let's see what happens to the Turkish driver. So as he's coming up in through Curva Grande, then he's not really in a battle with anyone because he's got nobody behind or aside or ahead of him that is in close range. So he's breaking down in towards the chicane here. And does he bounce over the entry curb? Yeah, he just took the entry curb too hard into the second chicane, and that's what threw the car off, because he clipped the front left wheel onto it and it raced the car over and it grounded itself on the curb. So that's why he's fallen back. But looking further up, meanwhile, Picciola, the man on a mission, is very close to race to rule right now and has gone for the move into the Ascari chicane. I'm not sure if there was contact between the two of them there, but that'll be figured out later on. But Picciola up into P7 as race to rule picks up a half-second penalty for track limits at the Ascari chicane. And further up front, meanwhile, Josh Bosch is gradually being reeled in as he goes very deep into Parabolica, in fact. He has gone incredibly deep, and that has cost him well over 4/10 of a second. And that means Josh Bosch is now definitely going to be hounded by Robert and the whole battle for P3 as he comes across the line to begin the final lap. So what it means is now that Josh Bosch is finding himself falling backwards into a four-way fight for P2 right at the end. And this is not what he would have wanted. He would have wanted a clean run to the end of the race, simply because if he has a peaceful race now, he'll be starting on the front row alongside his teammate for race number 2. Now he's got a huge amount of effort to put in to make sure he picks up that second place. As Trails of Doom right now, we should report ahead in P6 and ahead of Picciola, only by a small margin, mind you, and almost Peachy's into the slipstream of the Ferrari ahead of him. But we look further up front and you can see that Robert is gaining massively on Josh Bosch, who looks at going defensive initially, but I think thinks better of it, as Robert goes very heavy into the second chicane and nails it on the brakes there. That was a very classic move by Robert, the standard one into turn 2, takes out the inside. I think Josh at this point is thinking about the wider championship. As we can see, Careless One picks up a 1-second penalty for track limits at turn 5, and that means now that he's going to fall to the back of this grid and fall off the back of it coming out the second Lesbo, which is a disaster for the Dutch driver there, which means it's a three-way sprint now between second, third and fourth for second place, as Careless One falls back into the clutches of Trails of Doom. But I think he's got enough of a buffer not to have to worry about it. Now, if you're in Robert's shoes at this point, do you worry about going defensive? Well, I think he's got the confidence in the fact he's in that McLaren. He doesn't have to go defensive unless the guys behind are within 2/10 of him into a braking zone. And Josh Bosch, meanwhile, able to pull away from the lathe behind him. In fact, he's pulling away at quite a rate of knots. I think he's done everything he needs to here, unless the lathe goes to the mother of all sends into Parabolica, more like the mother of all dive bombs. I don't think it's going to happen. But as he comes out of the final corner then, ladies and gentlemen, after 5 laps, it will be your race winner, MDC, who's led from the front, start to finish. He comes across the line ahead of Robert Di Macchio by 4.5 seconds in the Ferrari 458. Robert Di Macchio comes home in second, holding on there, the German, for P2, ahead of Josh Bosch, who holds off for life for P3. Careless One, the second, and there's a drag race to the line between Trails of Doom and Picciola, and Trails of Doom just holds on to P6 by the smallest of margins. It is going to be Jerry R driver in P8, Race Through in P9, R Dutch in P10, Fergie the Viper in P11, and then it will be Driving Dutch who rounds off our field in P12. But congratulations to our race winner, MDC. Well, that was an absolutely cracking race one once we finally had it through to its full distance. But here's your race results, of course, subject to any steward's decisions. MDC was your race winner by 4.5 seconds over Robert Di Macchio, and our podium was rounded off by Josh Bosch, doing a good job in the Citroen there to keep it cool and bring home third place. Behind him, a special mention should go to Valet for picking up P4, the best result achieved by Team Chubba Chups over the course of the season to date, and he'll be looking to build upon that in race number 2, and our top 5 was rounded off by Careless One from the Netherlands in the Citroen. Our fastest lap in race 1, a 1:57.7 on lap number 4, going to R Dutch in the 458 Italia Ferrari. And now everybody needs to get ready for race number 2, and I'm going to have a quick sip of water because I'm going to be losing my voice if this carries on. Goodness me, but what a cracker of a race one. And MDC really dominated it. But to be fair, whereas MDC dominated things in the lead position, it wasn't as though everybody else had clear races. But the one that we really have to think of here is Picciola, who had that horrific opening lap where he went all the way to the back of the field, but to recover to P7 and be literally drag racing to the line against Trouser Doom for P6. He didn't quite get it there, and a big shout out to Trouser Doom as well. It should be mentioned for the fact that Team Trouble Shark's getting their best 2 results of the season in one race, a P4 and a P6, personal bests for both drivers. Could they be on for top 5 finishes throughout the rest of tonight? We'll just have to wait to find out. But Picciola is going to have to really do the mother of all recovery jobs. And also, unfortunately, one driver who had an absolute nightmare towards the end was the Honda driver of Driving Dutchman, who was looking quite on track for a nice result. But of course, he's got 2 more races to make up that lost ground from the rear of the field. And a shout out to Aluco33 in the chat. We say hello to him after his fantastic performances in EU Division 1 throughout Season 36. Can we expect you coming back, Luco, for Season 37? That's brilliant to hear, Luco. It's good we're going to be having you back soon, as we're going to be getting underway with race number 2 in the very near future. But we're just really waiting for the countdown at this point, and I think from the perspective of what can happen in race 2 then, so based on what we've seen, our Ferrari drivers seem to be quite feisty once they get past that initial acceleration phase going down into turn 1. The driver to watch out for, I think, will be Josh Bosch. He'll know now that he can get the run on Robert, and Robert knows it as well, because that's why he went so defensive into turn 1. Both drivers have sized one another up over the course of race 1, and the question will be, will Josh Bosch try and go for P2 right at the start, or will he try to use Robert as his pace car and then try and get him later on in the race? And we're waiting for race 2 any moment now. Alrighty then, ladies and gentlemen, race number 2 coming at you. And we are going to have another 5 laps of sprint action at Monza to see how it's all going to play out. Place your bets now, or forever hold your peace. So as we wind down to the grid, this time it will be MDC on the right and Robert on the left-hand side once again. Slight changes among the field. Josh Bosch and Valave making up the second row. But watch out for Picciola in P7. What can he do in his efforts to recover to the front of the field? The Finnish driver, of course, being the Finnish missile. And it's lights out and away they go. And Robert this time getting a slightly stronger start, albeit not the strongest start of the field. And Josh Bosch already making a huge amount of ground in that drag race down towards turn 1. But he has bumped into the back of MDC. So as they're all coming down in towards turn 1, it is going to be free wide with MDC being a little bit ahead but braking very early. And Josh Bosch, I think here, has actually got a really solid run as there's quite a bit of contact further down the field. But everybody seems to have made it through. And Robert getting squeezed out a little bit to the outside of turn 2 there. And Race Thrill's actually made it up into P6, but the thing is he finds himself at the head of a very, very angry train of McLarens right now, and they're all coming charging through Curva Grande together. The Lathe, meanwhile, is side by side with Robert Di Micchiro in the run up towards turn 4, and you can see up front MDC and Josh Bosch working together and not trying to cost one another too much time. But Careless One has got into mix, and the Lathe has spun out, and Careless One's gone wide. It's carnage! It's absolute carnage, and that means as Josh Bosch takes off the circuit, I think that's because of the incident with Careless One. He's decided to get out of space, but MDC has made it through, and look who's in second place, ladies and gentlemen. Race to all the Canadian. You love to see it. He's made his way all the way out the field, and he's up into second by the halfway point as Furky the Viper almost means it, and we've got Careless One off onto the gravel, coming out of the second left one into the wall. It is kicking off left, right and centre, and it's gone from good to bad to worse for so many of our drivers. Who's going to be on top come the end of this race? Well, MDC, I think, pretty much guaranteed himself a race win here, but behind, Racer is pulling away from Furky the Viper, and Trouser Doom is up into P4. So the whole field's been flipped upside down, and the Honda driving Dutchman as well is up into P5. This is absolutely crazy. And behind him, you've got Jerry R Driver and R Dutch, the two drivers working together from the Benetton Tribute Racing team. And they're going into Parabolica. And I think R Dutch is trying to look for a move on his teammate. But his teammate sort of giving him the space, but saying there's no need to go for it really here. So after one lap, it's MDC ahead of Race to Rule. Behind them, it's Furky the Viper, Trouser Doom, and driving Dutchman. Behind these guys, it's Jerry R Driver, R Dutch, Robert DiMicchio, Josh Bosch and Valave rounding off our top 10 so far. And then Pete Chiola in P11 after that great start, going all the way to that and Careless one right at the rear of the field. But as they come into turn one for the second time of asking, Trouser do go for the and there's a huge misbreak from R Dutch, knocking Furky the Viper wide, and both drivers have been reset. That is so unfortunate for Furky the Viper. He'll know that he was the victim of an incident there, because R Dutch just seemed to get it wrong on the brake. And that has cost them both a huge number of places, and it's opened up the field even more as Race to Rule is now in battle with Trouser Do, who's gained massively on the Canadian after turn one. And I think the Ferrari driver here sends his blood in the water and is trying to get it done for second place, as driving Dutchman now in P4, the Honda driver literally doing everything he can to hold on to that position, because he knows it could be a top 5 finish at this point. And look who's behind him, having recovered so rapidly after all the goings on. It's Robert DiMicchio as we ride on board with Jerry R Driver, who's coming up towards the second Lesmo. And that has been an absolutely mad opening couple of laps. And, well, I think everybody's now settling down a little bit as we see penalties being dished out here for some of our drivers. We've got R Dutch, who's had to burn a penalty and dropping down to P10 as Josh Bosch makes his way up into P9. And Pete Chiola's going to get in amongst that as the camera transitions over here. And I think Peachy's going to go for the move up the inside, going down into Ascari. And indeed, he's going to get it done. Quite a simple overtake here, your standard overtake. But speaking of keeping things simple, let's find out what happened at the start of the race. So as we ride with Careless 1 then, as he was coming up in towards turn 4 and 5. So, went into the corner here, and he went down the inside of Josh Bosch. But he seemed to get contact off of Josh Bosch, and that knocked him out onto the gravel, and then he had to recover, and that's what kicked everything off, and that's why Josh Bosch backed it off so much, and that's what set off the chain reaction there. So it was an innocent little tap which blew everything wide open as they come on to lap number 3 now. And as you can see, well, you've got Race to Rule, who's going defensive versus Trouser Do, but remember that McLaren is so strong in a straight line, and look at how Trousers in the Ferrari is struggling to get the advantage, but he's going to do it on the brakes, because the brakes of that Ferrari are no joke. They are as strong as, if not stronger than, the McLarens, and he's almost got it done, but he did give himself a little bit of a breather as he came out of turn 2 there, as to not knock Race to Rule ride. And you can see that behind them we've got driving Dutchman now, who finds himself looking at the rear end of both drivers, and as they're coming through Curva Grande up into turns 4 and 5 for the third time asking, he's going to look for the move on the outside. Trouser, he's being boxed in a little bit here, and as he backs it off, he's looking for a little cut to the inside, but it's not quite going to happen from driving Dutchman, but he's trying to find a way through, but he's got Robert all over the back of him as well, so he's got to keep one eye forward and one eye back. It's such a difficult situation for driving Dutchman right now, because he senses, I reckon, a great result as Robert DiMicchio goes off there. What has happened to Robert? He's just dropped back a little bit. That was almost curtains for Robert coming out of the chicane. So as he came out, did he just go wide or onto the grass? So as he's coming up towards the first Lesmo, I think there may have been a little bit of contact between himself and Jerry R Driver, and that's knocked him, that's knocked him wide, and that's why he's gone there. I think that might be a racing incident, but we'll wait and find out. But still, DiMicchio now down into P7, and as they continue through Ascari, that he's got some recovery work to do once again, as Trouser Do finds himself up into P2 after Ascari, so that's where he's gained it. It was at the breaking point into turn 8 Ascari, but Race to Rule literally side by side once again. That McLaren coming back like a fish out of cold water. No, sorry, like a fish out of hot water, as Trouser Do goes defensive. In fact, Race to Rule's got incredibly deep as a result, and that means the Honda driving Dutchman is now up the inside, going for the cutback, and we've got a Honda now looking at getting on the podium. Well, I never thought I'd see it tonight, ladies and gentlemen, but still, we've got a couple more laps to go, 2 more laps to go, and we have got Jerry R Driver burning a penalty at the start-finish line. So our little pack of 3 here, being led by Trouser Do, is the battle for second place. Behind, you've got Robert DiMicchio going for the move on Furky the Viper, a standard move into turn 1. He parks it right in front of Furky the Viper, as is his right to do so, and the Turkish driver lose for Robert's gain. But behind him, of course, you've got Jerry R driver still ahead of Valave, and it's all turning upside down for the Chubba Chups boys, as now their second driver, Trouser Doom, is doing a fantastic job, as we've got some flashing lights for Valave. Not sure what that's about, but it's literally going from head to tail. And meanwhile, we shouldn't forget about, hold on a second, I say meanwhile, look at Driving Dutchman, he's going to go for the move into the chicane, and he's going to just about hold it, I think, although that was very, very late on the brakes, and I don't know whether he's picked up a penalty as a result of it, and Race Through is now coming back at him on the inside into the first Lesmo, and I think Dutchman wasn't able to hold on, but that was such a daring move, because he came from so far back, and I think that caught everybody by surprise, and most so Trouser Doom, who's lost out 3 places in all of that and moved all the way down. And we've got synchronised crashing from the Benetton boys. Oh my good lord, you couldn't make this up. They're both into the wall coming out of the second Lesmo. Oh goodness me, what on earth happened there? So as we ride on board with our Dutch then, I think they've just both simply gone wide. So as they're coming out the first Lesmo, you're going to see the Benetton boy up front of Jerry R driver. Does he just go a bit wide off the curb? He does. And our Dutch follows. It literally was the same mistake from both drivers as we hop away from them. And in the battle for P2, we should point out with everything going on, we've missed it a little bit. Robert now finds himself up into P2. We have got 5 drivers competing for second place. Oh, and it's all kicking off behind Robert. Robert's just running away right now. And Furky the Viper has moved back up to P3 as Driving Dutchman got squeezed into the wall there at Parabolica and has flashed his lights. I think he's enraged. He's Driving Dutchman about everything that's going on, and Robert is now pulling away as they're all coming up towards turn 1 for the final time. And you can see Furky the Viper on one side, you've got Trouser Doom on the other side, and Ray's all swerving. I don't think he realised that Trouser Doom's trying to come through. He's being reverse Mosesed and he's going to lose 2 places, but then Trouser Doom has gone off. There may have been contact, I think there was, because Racer is parking the car off circuit, and that means Furky the Viper is up into P3 and Driving Dutchman up into P4, and Valave is now back up into P5. As you can see behind, Josh Bosch has recovered to P6 as a result of all this, and now he's at the front of a pack of 5 cars. But as they come up towards the second chicane then, I think our top guys right now are going to have a peaceful time of it, albeit Driving Dutchman has had to go defensive. But behind me, well, you can see that Josh Bosch is ahead of Pete Chiola, who's made the move on Trouser Doom, and Careless won a race through behind all that. And it is just simply carnage. You just can't believe it. They won't settle down into any sort of order, mind you. I don't think you guys and girls at home mind. As Valave, meanwhile, he's trying to chase after Driving Dutchman, but he's got so much work to do, and that Honda is so strong on the straights compared to the Ferrari. Oh, we've got Racer off of the second Lesmo, and he's lost out in the battle for P6. That is a disaster for Racer as he drops down towards P10. But one person's loss is another's gain, as we can see Furky the Viper just hold on to P3 right now. Driving Dutchman doing everything he can to hold on to P4, but he's got that fast charging Ferrari all over his 6th. Valave looking for a move, but of course Dutchman can just go defensive as they cut towards Parabolica. But we hate to cut away here, ladies and gentlemen, as he's done a back-to-back set of wins now. It's MDC coming across the line from the United Kingdom for another win. Meanwhile, behind him, it will be the German of Robert Di Macchio, who after 5 laps of utter carnage has recovered to P2 and picks up that second place. Behind him will be Furky the Viper, rounded off our podium. And then in the drag race line, it is the Honda of Driving Dutchman holding off Valave. There's Josh Bosch ahead of Pete Chiola in P6, Trouser Doom in P8, Careless 1 P9, and Race to Rule just about holds on to P10 despite it all. And then we've got a long way back till we see Jerry R driver in P11, the first of our Benetton drivers, leading the Benettons home in P11 and P12 respectively, Dutch being in P12, the last of our drivers coming across the line. Goodness me. And after all that, congratulations once again to our race winner, MDC from the United Kingdom. Goodness me, folks. I think somebody's going to need to hire me a stunt double, or at least get me some oxygen. Oh, goodness me. That was absolute carnage. Albeit relatively clean carnage, but carnage all the same. But there's your classification after 5 laps, subject to any stewards' inquiries, of which I think we're going to get a number of them for this race. MDC, your race winner. at the top of the podium by 10.5 seconds ahead of Robert Di Macchio, who, it should be pointed out, had to do a huge recovery job during that race to P2. Ferky the Viper rounding off our podium with a well-deserved P3, the Turkishman. P4 going to Driving Dutchman in the NSX. It's great to see the NSX up in the top 5 after all that. Pity he couldn't hold on for the podium, but it all kicked off on lap 4. And Valave rounding off our top 5 in the Ferrari. The British driver there doing a very good job of getting some solid points on the board for the Chupa Chups team. The fastest lap in race number 2 on lap number 5 going to Robert Di Macchio with a 1:58.3 in the McLaren 650S. And indeed, it should be pointed out that Driving Dutchman started P12. So driver of that race for me was Driving Dutchman, recovering all the way from the back of the field to P4. Okay, it's Robert Di Macchio. Oh, dearie me. Make sure we save that replay. But I'm going to take a breather, folks, and just take 5 seconds for myself, if you don't mind. Oh, dearie, dearie me. That was crazy. And now we come on to the final race of the evening, which is... And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you're ever wondering about that steward in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, or that member of the pit crew, doesn't he look like Harada from Bandai Namco, the head producer of Tekken 7? But that's trivia. Race number 3, it'll be 10 laps, and it's the strategy race, of course, in the fact that we have a mandatory pit stop in this one. Whether you choose to take tyres or not is a gamble. We saw last night in EU Division 1 that if you just went for the pit stop and didn't take the tyres, you lost approximately 5 seconds in the pits. Whereas if you went for the tyre change, it was approximately 8 to 9 seconds. It's a huge difference in terms of time, and you've got to make sure that you pit at the right time so as to either come out in a position where you can pick up some slipstream if you're in a slower car on the straights, or alternatively you come out in that clear air, because if you get caught in a battle, particularly battles down into turn 1, you can lose seconds worth of time. And we are going to be getting underway with race number 3 very shortly, ladies and gentlemen. It'll be coming at you as all of our drivers are now heading out onto the circuit. And here we go, folks. 10 laps will be the difference and the decider. Who's going to come out on top by the end of it? It's anybody's guess. So as we look to the front of the grid, it is once again MDC on the right and Robert Di Macchio on the left. Behind them, this time, Ferky the Viper and Driving Dutchman. But the people we need to watch out for are the likes of KLS1 and Josh Bosch. Further back down the field, how will they recover during this one? And it's lights out and away they go one more time, and you can see Josh Bosch already coming off of his grid box and going for it, trying to get into the middle as soon as possible. And Robert Di Macchio, meanwhile, trying to hang it in the back of MDC this time and trying to use as much tow as possible for MDC's Ferrari. I think we aren't going to see a challenge for the position here. I think Robert is just trying to consolidate the position as all of our drivers come charging through, and there is a huge concertina for P5 with Valave just getting up into P5 ahead of everybody pretty much, and it's all all kicked off there, and you do have to wonder what exactly has gone on, because a lot of our drives have been held up by, I think, a bit of contact between Valave and Driving Dutchman, and it's meant that we've got 2 packs already after only 3 corners, with our race leaders right now pulling away in the battle from P1 to P4, and then everyone else behind as they all make it through unscathed. But meanwhile, KLS1 going for a huge lunge into the second chicane, and that is going to cause everyone to fall back. And speaking of falling back, actually, Josh Bosch got it all sorts of wrong coming out of the second chicane, and it means now he's actually falling back into the head of the train in that massive battle for P5, which Picciola is now leading, with Valave, Race to Rule and company tripping over one another. As they come in the run down now towards Ascari, having coming out the second Lesbo, we do have a couple of drivers who are right at the back. It's Driving Dutchman in particular, but Jerry R. driver at the back of this massive train pack, if you will. And as they all come down towards the Ascari chicane then, Josh Bosch at the head of the field, you can see that Picciola is already under attack from Race to Rule and Valave. Race to Rule going for the move on Valave and getting it done very aggressively there. And I think Valave actually got knocked a little bit as there's been some contact between all the drivers. And there's a spin for R-Dutch off the circuit at turn 10 and into the wall. Oh, goodness me. It's gone from good to bad to worse already for him, and he's only on the first lap. It's a disaster. But as they come around into complete lap number 1, it is MDC ahead of Robert DeMicro. Meanwhile, behind him, it is Furky the Viper, and then Josh Bosch, followed by Picciola, Race to Rule, and then KLS1 up to P7, Charles Adu in P8, Jerry R. driver P9, and then we've got Valave in P10, then Driving Dutchman behind, and R. Dutch at the rear of the field right now. But as they all come down towards turn 1 for the second time of asking, look how Robert is trying to go for these little incremental moves against MDC, trying to get in his head a bit and putting that mental pressure on, and Josh Bosch not able to pull away from the 2 McLarens behind him right now of Picciola and Race to Rule, as we see that Robert there has picked up a half-second penalty. That's most likely for a cut on the first part of the opening chicane, that half-second penalty, because he did cut in a little bit whilst going slowly in first or second gear, and he's looking for the move on MDC here, and this is a tactical move, I reckon. He's trying to cost MDC time and pull him backwards into a fight, because he knows he's going to have to burn the half-second penalty once he comes out the second Lesmo. Behind them, we've still got that battle going on for P4, albeit it has settled down a bit, and this is going to give us a brilliant opportunity to see what happened in the first lap at the Ascari chicane with Valave. So Zoo's coming down here towards the Ascari chicane, then he's going to have Race to Rule knock him on his inside, and that sent him slightly across the circuit and actually pushed him off the racing line. And then our KLS1 has come through, and as he's tried to rejoin Valave, he's found himself literally having to stall onto the path of other drivers. So I'm going to have to wait and see what happens with the stewards on that one. Can't really apportion any credit or blame for that, but that was very unfortunate for all the drivers involved there. Valave just finding himself knocked out of position and then having to try and find his way back in, but it didn't work out. As we can see that Jerry R. driver now up into P7, having got past KLS1, and Charles Adu and Valave right behind him, trying to gain more places as KLS1 gets overtaken by Charles Adu, and I think he's actually trying to let people through by looks of things in terms of how slow he's going out of the opening chicane, or at least that's what it looked like initially, but perhaps he's back up to speed now. But as they come to the end of lap number 2, then MDC is still ahead by 2.2 seconds after Robert falling back with that penalty, and MDC not losing a huge amount of time with everything going on, and Robert right now finding himself at the head of a pack in that battle for P2, where he's got Picciola and Josh Bosch chasing after him by a huge margin. Though Josh Bosch is going to try and go around the outside, but Robert DeMicro has got enough throttle input there just to keep himself ahead right now and doesn't really need to concede any ground. And Furky the Viper and Race to Rule in the mix of this as well, so we've got a 5-way battle for P2, as we can see further back behind. As we look back from Jerry R. driver's car, he's pulling away from the guys behind, starting with Trouser Doom and KLS1 acting as the filler for the Ferrari sandwich, as he's now coming around through Curva Grande meanwhile, and Jerry R. driver really finds himself in a bit of a need to break away from P8. If he can do it, then he can pull himself up to the fight for P2 potentially, although Robert DeMicro has already pulled away from P3, who is Josh Bosch right now, and you can see that actually Picciola at the head of this fight for P4. He's got Race to Rule and also He's got Furky the Viper behind him. The three McLaren drivers here, all in equal machinery, of course, so this means it could all open up at any point, but I think they're all just simply trying to keep it calm and try to catch back up to Josh Bosch. They're just outside of that slipstream zone of 0.75 seconds right now and losing some time initially on the straights, but they will start to close it down as they get up towards the Ascari and then Parabolica because of the McLaren's top speed advantage. As they come up towards the corner then, for the third time of asking, you can see he's definitely closing up, and I think what it is, Picciola has a much stronger run through the Ascari chicane compared to Josh Bosch. Josh just doesn't have that momentum through the chicane, and now Peachy finds himself well inside the slipstream of the Macmillan driver with the Arse Penis Racing driver here trying to get onto the rear end of the Macmillan car, but we'll have to wait and find out where he's fruitful in that or not. And as they come through the final corner then one more time, you can see that the gain that Josh Bosch made on the opening part of the lap is really being cut down now, and in fact that's 3 tenths lost in the space of 2 corners and over 1 sector. What it means is that as we go further and further into the race, I do not think at any point right now Josh Bosch can feel comfortable in his position out on circuit. Instead, he's just going to have to try and work it as much as possible, and if he can break away then do so, but otherwise accept the fact he's going to be pulled back into a fight. As you can see, Race to All going for a very adventurous move there into turn 1. Now I'm not sure whether Picciola just shut the door on him in terms of was it the right thing to do there in terms of shutting the door. We'd have to look back and see that, but of course that's for our stewards to do. But I think Race to All is going to feel as though he had the door shut on him unfairly there, and he's had to back out the throttle coming out of turn 2 because otherwise he would have picked up a 1.5 second penalty for such a high speed run across the turn 1 curb. So that's why you saw him lift off so much there, ladies and gentlemen, rather than chase after the finish driver. But that was a bit unfortunate for the Canadian. I think he thought he had the move done there for the best part of that sequence. As we can see, Rob is really chasing after MDC at the moment. In fact, has brought that gap down by a couple of attempts, but MDC is not giving up in terms of trying to break away. As in the rear of your camera shot there, Furky the Viper going wide out the first Lesmo and just pushing a bit too hard right now. And in fact, he's going to go completely wide out a second Lesmo and hit Trouser Doom in the process. Trouser Doom has spun off as well. Oh no, and I feel so sorry for the British driver because he was just an innocent bystander in all of it. But that means that Trouser Doom and Furky the Viper have fallen back to P9 and P10 as we now look further up the field. I think we've got a move on between Valave and Callis 1. Callis 1 still in P7 ahead of Valave. No change there then for the time being. But Trousers, that was just disastrous as Callis 1 picks up a half-second penalty for track limits at the Ascari chicane. In fact, both of them do. They're both going to be burned in as soon as possible. Well, they both burnt it at the inappropriate place, but mind you, if they're both racing one another, I don't think either one's going to tell tale with each other as they come up towards Parabolica then. And as we go on to lap number 5, it's MDC still up front, but Robert is closing the gap. It is worth pointing out that the McLaren driver has got that gap down, and Race to All comes into the pits, the first of our drivers to make a pit stop, and Careless 1 follows suit, as does Valave. Now, Race to All, will he go for the tyre change? Well, Callis 1 has not gone for the tyre change, neither has Race to All. They're all going out, so they're using the information from EU Division 1 last night to realise that there is no need to take a tyre change in the pits, as Driving Dutchman is now up into P8, but he's got a lot of work still to do, as Callis 1 will hang it to the inside and make sure he holds on to that P7. But as we look further around right now, and I think Valave did take a tyre change there. Yep, he did, and that's why he's so far back compared to the two other guys who pitted. Up front, meanwhile, MDC is definitely being closed up by Robert at this point. And it is worth wondering whether MDC is doing a bit of tyre management at the moment just to keep himself fresh for the end of the race. As we see Jerry, our driver, in the rear of your camera shot there, getting it all sorts of wrong coming out of the second chicane and almost spinning it into the sand trap. Unfortunately, he did get the opportunity of making his sand castles this time. As Picciola goes to the move on Josh Bosch here into the second Lesmo. A common overtake in place if you've got a good run out of the first Lesmo. Good move by Peachy. And now the McLaren driver trying to make his way further up the field. And I think Josh Bosch at this point is just keeping it cool and realising that he's still got half a race to go. There's no point trying to play too defensive right now because there could be the opportunity to pick up more positions later on in the race. They're working together, and I think they're going to try and catch up to the leaders by simply letting the faster of the two cars in terms of on the straights, which is that McLaren in the hands of Picciola, pull the Citroen along, and then they'll fight towards the end. But we'll wait and find out, can Josh Bosch hold on to the back of Peachy? It's anybody's guess right now as MDC is being reeled in hand over fist by Robert. The gap now down to 1.2 seconds as MDC goes very deep. In fact, both drivers go very deep on entry into Parabolica, and that's not going to do either of them any good, and the Ferrari will get the better run out of the corners. MDC is into the pit, both drivers into the pits very early at this point, and that means as Peachy stays out and Josh goes in, MDC going for a tyre change here, and I think what he's realised is the Ferrari, being quite sensitive to its tyres, just does not have the tyre life to get to the end comfortably, and so he's going for the tyre change, as is Robert, funny enough. So those two all going in terms of tyre change, as is Josh Bosch, and that means Jerry R driver now finds himself, hold on a second, what has happened to MDC here? He's gone charging through the corner. I'm hoping that's not a connection issue, because if so, it is going to be an absolute nightmare, and MDC, I believe, just getting it all wrong there. And in fact, because he cut through, we've now got Robert DeMicro coming up behind him. And, well, that was an absolutely crazy one. I'm assuming that was just a mistake for MDC and he forgot to brake. But well, your guess is as good as mine. As they come up towards turn 4 for the 6th time of asking, and MDC going fully defensive here, and it looks the connection stable. So our race leader at the moment is Picciola, and if Peachy times this right, given the fact that Robert and MDC are fighting, if Peachy recognises this and pits on the next lap and doesn't change tyres, he could sneak away with this at the moment, or if Peachy just goes along here and lets these two fight. But the problem is right now, both of them need to stop fighting, otherwise the Finnish driver is literally going to pick up the win and inherit it, and that gap is getting bigger and bigger. It's opened up to 5.7 seconds now, and MDC is still fighting versus the German here. He's not giving way, and all Peachy needs to do is recognise this and not change tyres in the pits. He just needs to run away with this right now, and he's going to have the win. Behind, meanwhile, Josh Bosch is gradually catching up, but with that tyre change, he finds himself quite a long way back, and with that half-second penalty, he's going to lose up even more time. That's not the penalty he wanted. But I'm sure that other drivers will be happy to see that he's got that penalty, as MDC comes up into Parabolica, and they seem to have settled into some semblance of an order as MDC goes through Parabolica ahead of Robert, and the gap between them and our race leader is now 6 seconds, but it is coming down. In fact, Peachy has had a disastrous Parabolica. He's lost 3 tenths from one corner, and he's going to lose even more time on the start-finish straight, as that gap is charging down right now, and it's down to 5.5 seconds and still closing as Jerry R driver comes into the pits, and Jerry R driver has actually leapt a huge chunk of the field, and he's going to be coming out in P4 here. So the Ferrari driver has literally jumped past everyone, and by not taking on any tyres, as there's been some sort of yellow flag for somebody, and I think, well, MDC's got it wrong. Let's find out what happened. So in coming down towards turn 1 then on lap number 7, I think MDC's probably just missed his braking point, because Robert's going to go for the move, and MDC, yep, he's just missed his braking point, gone very deep, tried to cut it, and he's got a reset. So that is MDC. That explains why he's fallen back, and that means that right now Robert has got to absolutely hound it like the clappers in order to overhaul Peachy. If he can get within 5 seconds of Peachy, then he will have Peachy beat in terms of a pit stop. He does not want that gap to get beyond 5.5 seconds, because otherwise Peachy is going to be coming out of the pits ahead of Robert and out of the slipstream zone approximately. So Robert has got to be the man on a mission right now, but the German is on course to win if he can nail the next couple of laps. Of course, around him, Jerry R driver, the one who's gained out of it all, as Race to Rule goes very wide, as does Josh Bosch coming out of the second Lesmo. So that would be turn 7. Both drivers there turning it into rallycross, and Race to Rule really the unsung hero at the moment, doing a lot of recovery work after a disastrous opening couple of laps. And well, he's charging down towards the Ascari chicane behind Josh Bosch, and what can he do right now? It's anyone's guess, as they all come through one more time, and now onto the straight down towards Parabolica. And you have to wonder, is he going to go for the move early, Race to Rule, and think that he can have Jerry R driver as well, or will he stay behind Josh Bosch? I think he may actually go for the move here, as Josh Bosch moves to the centre of the circuit, gradually putting himself over towards the defensive line, and Josh Bosch going fully defensive. Race to Rule's going to have to try and find a way to cut back round, as Picciola continues on his conquest around the circuit right now and does not pit. MDC getting away from Jerry R driver, but there's still a lot of work to do for MDC if he wants to get back in that fight for the race lead. As we can see, coming across the line then, Josh Bosch having to go immediately defensive against Race to Rule. The McLaren just having so much more leg power down that straight. You can see he's already ahead before the braking zone. But of course, Race to Rule being forced to the outside. Will Josh Bosch try and go deep on the brakes to hold the inside? And Race to Rule's just about got it done. A very good move, but Josh Bosch has got the run back on him with the acceleration of the Citroen. So they're just constantly trading places, and Josh Bosch has held on this time. The Careless One is now being pulled into the fight. As we look further back, and we see Valive also chasing after here back in P8, Furky the Viper in P9 ahead of Driving Dutchman, the NSX driver, and then our last two runners out on the circuit right now are Dutch and Trousers of Doom. Nowhere to be seen in terms of the action, but still running out on circuit in P11 and P12 respectively. But up front it is Peachy Erler, still 5.1 seconds ahead of Robert here. Peachy doing everything he can, I think, to nurse those tyres the distance, but also to try and hold that gap. And Robert has actually made a mistake coming into the first Lesmo, because that gap opened up to 5.3 seconds and now it's coming down once again. But the problem is, of course, that Peachy has got to nail these laps and really need... Hold on a second, I'm just seeing a huge incident happening, and Race to Rule. What on earth happened there? Let's find out. Oh, my sincere apologies. Got a bit of an issue with the replay camera there. So he was in the first Lesmo and he went very wide as a result. And, well, he had to swerve out the way of Careless One. And then did he just simply get it wrong at the second Lesmo as well and decide to do a bit of rallycross because of the dirt on the tyres? Yep, he did. And that's why Race to Rule went off wide there. And Valeva's got past going down to Ascari because Race to Rule lost so much speed and time as a result of those incidents. But up front, Peachy Erler, the gap is still 5.2 seconds. He's doing enough to hold on right now should he pit, but he's literally going to come out in front or on the grill of Robert. So it's going to be so close between those two when Peachy pits, and Peachy will have to pit on the next lap because it's lap number 9, meaning it is the final lap for the pit window to be open. Jerry R. driver in P4 right now. There's not much happening around him, but he's driven a fantastic race so far, and he'll just be hoping he can bring home a very strong result here. And Josh Bosch is the one who's feeling the threat right now from Careless One, having got rid of Race to Rule after Race to Rule made that mistake at the first Lesmo on the previous lap. He's now got a fellow Citroen hounding him, the Dutchman behind him, trying to take you on, as Valive is going defensive against Race to Rule in the battle for P7. As we hop on board with Valive and look back, Race to Rule with a 1 second penalty for cutting the curve. That is a disaster for the Canadian, who is flashing his lights. Now, whether this is in anguish, alternatively to say to Valive, I'm not going to go for the move because I've got a penalty, we'll wait and find out. But I think he is going to go for the move. Bar my manners there, and he's going to go on the inside initially, but thinks second of it. In the end, he hasn't got the overlay. And Valive getting very sideways out of turn 5 there, and now going to go defensive as we see Josh Bosch doing a very similar move going into Lesmo 1 there. And as they come through the corner, no change, but Josh Bosch definitely feeling a lot of pressure right now from Careless One with only 1.5 laps to go. And behind all of these guys, meanwhile, you've got Furky the Viper, who's just holding on in P9 right now, ahead of Driving Dutchman, who's trying to chase him down. But up front, I can sadly say, folks, that the gap between Peachy and Robert DeMicro is now down to 4.7 seconds and coming down still very gradually, which means that Robert is expected to inherit the lead when Peachy pits at the end of this lap. But behind them, MDC not really making any ground right now, so MDC is not going to gain too much from all of this. Jerry R. Drive still holding on there, and Josh Bosch having to hold off the fast-charging Careless One, who is doing his utmost to try and find a way around the British driver here, and he's going to have to go to the outside for Parabolica as Peachy's into the pits, and Josh Bosch planting it on the curb, under braking, but Careless One going for the cutback here, and Josh Bosch going very deep as a result, and Careless One has got the move done. Meanwhile, going up towards turn 1 then, it's going to be a drag race between Peachy Erler and Robert DeMicro, but Robert has got it done, folks. Peachy did not hold on long enough in terms of holding that gap, and Robert has got the lead going out of turn 2, and that means now it's 1 lap to go before the German cements his win here in race number 3. Josh Bosch going for the move on the inside versus Careless One, and that looked a very, very daring move. Let's watch that back on board. So as he was coming down towards turn 1, then you'll see that he's got the overspeed, but he's quite a way back still, and under brakes he just goes as deep as possible. The brakes, he realised he had to send it, and he got it done, and in the end he just managed to get himself enough in front of Careless One to be able to claim the racing line onto turn 2. But will Careless One come back at him? We'll wait and find out. But Peachy, having not taken that change of tyres, is chasing after Robert DeMicro right now, and he's not in that slipstream zone, so I don't think it's going to be on unless Robert makes a major mistake on the final half of this lap. Jerry R. Driver, meanwhile, in P4, doing everything he needs to right now, and he's only got a few more corners to go, and he can hold on, and Josh Bosch will simply keep Careless One behind him if he can. Behind these guys, of course, you've got that fast-charging Ferrari of the Lathe, who's only 1.3 seconds back now and getting ever closer. But, well, everything's opened up a bit, and Race to Rule has gone from good to bad to worse. The fact he's now down in P10, chasing after Driving Dutchman. After all the success, the Canadian finds himself towards the back. But as they're coming down towards the end then, coming up towards Parabolica, Robert is still ahead, 1.3 seconds ahead, and I think he's done it, ladies and gentlemen. One corner to go. So long as he doesn't make a hash brown on this one, it is going to be a new race winner tonight in the form of Robert de Micro from Germany. After 10 laps, he is your race winner after all the craziness, and he comes ahead of Picciola and MDC rounding off the podium. Jerry R. Driver coming home in P4. A fantastic effort from Jerry R. Driver ahead of Josh Bosch, who just held off Callis 1 and Valave. Callis 1 made a mistake somewhere because Valave has come home in P6. Furky the Viper coming home in P8. And it'll be Driving Dutchman in P9 in the Honda, followed by Race to Rule, and then R Dutch in, R Dutch in P11. And then last but not least, coming into the final corner now is Trouser Doom, who's going to be rounding off our field for the final race of this evening and the final race in Europe for EU Division 2 and the final round of season 36. Goodness me, it has been a crazy one as Trouser Doom crosses the line, and once again congratulations to our race winner Robert de Micro from Germany. Well, that was a fantastic race to end the evening. It had a little bit of everything. It had drama, it had strategy, it had smart tactics, it had crazy tactics. But here are your final standings, subject to any steward's inquiries, of course. Your race winner, Robert de Micro from Germany, ahead of Picciola and MDC. With the results tonight, MDC has granted himself the Drivers' Championship title of Season 36 EU Division 2, and on top of that, with the results they've obtained, I suspect that Team Macmillan have won the Constructors' Championship as well by a significant margin. Jerry R. Driver coming home in P4, and then rounding off our top 5 is the fellow Macmillan driver of Josh Bosch in the Citroen, and the fastest lap in race number 3 being a 1:57.787 on the final lap as set by Valive in the Ferrari 458 Italia. Well, that was absolutely fantastic. And now we've only got one more race for this evening, and that is King of the Karts, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, goodness. And congratulations to all of our drivers. It has been a fantastic set of races to commentate on over the course of this season. And I think the real special mention in this final round has to be to Jerry R. Driver for that fantastic P4 effort, much like what was achieved by Dutchman in the Honda NSX in race 2. And we're just taking a brief breather. Goodness me. That had a little bit of everything, I tell you. And what a win by Robert at the end there. I think if Peachy had pitted a couple of laps earlier, he could have thrown a spanner in the works, the Finnish driver, because he would have just found himself coming out right in front of or just behind Robert, and then it would have been a two-way fight to the end. But Robert played his cards right, and Peachy didn't quite pull it off on the strategy today. As we switch over to a King of the Karts then. We're going to have to improve on our results from last night in King of the Karts and try not to get killed literally at the start. I mean, I'm not sure if because I started pronouncing Robert's username correctly, that's the reason why he won. If that is the case, it's going to be up to a steward's inquiry, because that is technically the commentator influencing the outcome. It could be argued there, Gomez. Here we go then. The most important race of the evening for me. I'll try, Z. I'll try and get a podium in this one. I'm just starting to get a sort of paranoia that anybody might pump me off here. Pardon me. Well, hello there, MDC. Do you want a bit of the road, mate? Oh no. We can still catch up. We can still catch up. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Kraken. I'm glad you've all enjoyed it, folks. It's been a pleasure. Yes! Oh, wait, it's 2 laps tonight? It was only 1 lap last night, you cheeky buggers. I thought I had it then. I didn't realise it was 2 laps. I felt so well timed and everything, and it was just so, oh. Whoa. Oh no. Martin again. Oh, there we go. Yeah, and I get the silly reset. We can still catch up though, we can still catch up. He's a hacker. We need to work together, guys. I need to get it back on circuit. Nah. That sucks. I missed out on the podium, just literally by the smallest of margins. I would have won it if it was one lap. Yes, sods. Yeah, it was good though. Oh dearie me, that was mad. Alrighty folks, well with that was King of the Karts for EU Division 2 this evening, and that is the end of tonight's proceedings. It's been a good joy to bring this to you, and it's been a pleasure to bring to you season 36 for the European region. Do keep in mind that in a couple of weeks' time we will be back with season 37. I'm not sure what the details are of the racing or whatnot, but just a quickie, if you haven't had a chance already or you haven't had a chance to look at it yet, be sure to take a look at Josh Bosch's charity pledge page on Just Giving, because he was racing in support of Macmillan Cancer Trust. So the link has been posted there by Zoronic in the chat one more time. If you already looked, don't worry about it, but if you haven't had a look, be sure to take a look. It's a great cause, and remember, every point that Josh Bosch scored over the course of EU Division 2, he is donating as money to charity, plus an extra £30 to the fact that Team Macmillan won in the Constructors. So with that, be sure to take a look. Otherwise, I have been your host, Paul Walsh, and until next time, as always, ladies and gentlemen, stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.